Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of MPE. In this MPE Talk series, we bring fresh insight from top industry leaders and payment professionals. Today, I have the privilege to welcome a very, very great leader from a leading company, Spotify, Sandra Alzetta. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. Maybe a quick word of introduction, Sandra, if you don't mind, kind of like picturing what is your role and responsibility within this massive organization that everybody knows about, of course.
Sure. So I'm the VP responsible for commerce and customer service on a global basis. Collectively, we look after just over 700 million monthly active users, of which just shy of 300 million are paying subscribers. So from a commerce perspective, that means we're responsible for making sure that their entire commerce experience is as seamless and, of course, trusted as it possibly can be.
Very interesting. I think from the size of what you have to deal with, will be really interesting maybe for you to start by sharing some perspective in terms of what you're seeing from a customer behavior in terms of what dictate the preferences across markets. And of course, you've got a recurring model. So how does the different APMs plays out in terms of aligning with your strategy, really?
Yeah. So as you've just said, the vast majority of our volume is recurring, so it's subscription. We're that subscription business at heart. We're active in 184 markets, and anyone who works in payments knows that means 184 very different markets. Each one is quite unique. What's core to us in our philosophy is user choice. So we always look at a market and figure out how would our users wish to pay. And the philosophy is based on if that's how a user wants to pay, then it's really incumbent on us to make that available to them because we'll get the best performance from them.
That's quite incredible because to your point, every single payment method comes with its own framework. And I'm just wondering, how do you then dictate and prioritize without overcomplicating that seamless experience you're trying to bring?
Yeah, and you've made a couple of really good points there. It's how do we prioritize? And as you've just said, also without overly complicating things. So in any market, we will always accept as a baseline cards, international, domestic cards, domestic where possible. And then we will look at the market, figure out what are the prevalent payment methods, which ones are growing. We'll do quite a lot of consumer testing. We'll sometimes do painted door tests as well to see what the appetite is. And we choose very carefully which ones we add to our roster. And the reason that we need to be so careful is, one, it's an investment for us. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing properly. And secondly, we don't want to overly complicate or clog up the checkout with payment methods that just aren't interesting to our users. But we know that when we get it right, it makes an absolutely enormous difference. And I can give you some fantastic examples there. UPI, often spoken about, but UPI in India made an enormous difference to us. So now the vast majority of our volume comes from UPI. Brazil, everybody talks about PIX. We switched on PIX for one-time payments, and we're now looking at PIX Automático as well for recurring. We also switched on NewPay earlier this year in Brazil. That has made an enormous difference to us. Our consumers love it. But there's lots of examples. PayPay in Japan, lots of the wallets in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, and so on. Each one of these, when we switched them on, made a noticeable difference to our addressable market, and also performance-wise, they've really, both from an initial acquisition perspective and from a retention perspective, which of course, as a subscriptions business, is so important to us.
Yeah, I really like all of those examples that you're quoting, because the reality of doing global, from what I'm hearing in your strategy, is actually going local. So it's actually fairly much understanding the prominent payment method and kind of working with that. So that is probably one of the biggest learning really that we're seeing these days, because the borders are open, right? And it's kind of like doing global by design, but global by design, to your point, it's a local approach really, and market and region to region. Is there anything that surprises you? Because you've got probably quite a depth of perspective from region to region. There's always a lot of buzzwords and jargons. Is there anything from whether it's a payment method, whether it's from an adoption, anything that you introduce and try to scale up that, sort of like brought interesting, learning or surprises from that integration?
Markets vary. Some markets are, much more comfortable with account-to-account payments. Some are more comfortable with revolving credit. Others, that's just not on their radar at all. Debit or account-to-account. So I think just really emphasising each market is quite different in terms of consumer behaviour and preference. That's probably the key learning that we have.
And being able to cater to that, it's definitely quite a big task. And if we were to throw the big elephant in the room, right, because nowadays it's a lot of talk around AI, ML, agentic commerce, etc. There's a lot of signals, but there's also the adoption that doesn't necessarily evolve at the pace that the industry or the market are pushing things out. Where are you in terms of like that piece of innovation, all of these sorts of like new iterations and instrument and rails in terms of your strategy?
Well, I think it's fair to say we love innovation. We get excited about it. We see the opportunities. It's really part of Spotify's DNA in terms of our product offering itself, as well as what we do from a payments perspective. So obviously, we're super interested here. We're leaning in heavily. But I think it's also important to remember a year ago, this was a term that was just starting to evolve. It's still early days. There's lots to be thought through. And I would say from a user perspective, users are always going to look for the same things. They're going to look for a great user experience, and they're going to look for something that they can trust. So there's still quite a lot of work to be done in this area.
Yeah, trust is a fantastic word because trust leads to the conversion, leads to the repeat loyalty, which is fundamental with the framework that you operate. And, when you think, of course, that's one way, right? It's making the sales converting, etc. But we can't underestimate today how much fraud is rising. So equally, that's different profiling. Every instrument has got, different sorts of guardrails. How do you sort of balance innovation whilst also, keeping, your business safe and scaling at the pace that you're envisaging?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question. And ultimately, trust trumps everything. So as soon as a user loses trust in your offering, you're dead. Easy to lose as well. So that's always very much on our mind. So what do we do there? Well, we've been working on ML AI solutions for the whole risk management, revenue protection area for a long time, which is great because with the growing use of AI, the good guys are using it, but also the bad guys. What does that mean? It means that we have to keep working to keep that one step ahead. So taking our systems, continuing to evolve our signals, it's very active. It's not one and done. It's continually looking at it, learning, tweaking, being very careful about how we do that. So, we are very thoughtful when we make changes to our signals about what that's going to do, because whilst we're trying to minimize any misuse and fraud, obviously, equally important, or perhaps even more important to us, is making sure that our good users are not impacted, and we're not introducing unnecessary friction to them or the inconvenience. So the balance between avoiding false positives and minimizing fraud is always top of our mind.
Yeah, and false positive is a big problem in the industry. Certainly something that got everybody attention. What's the place of AI and ML then in that context for you? Are you leaning very heavily in terms of leveraging the intelligence and what that brings to?
Yes, very much so. We started this journey actually 5 years ago. So this is very much a natural evolution for us. We absolutely believe that this is the way that we best manage our system. So we've been doing that from a fraud management perspective, and we're increasingly using it from also just a general performance improvement in terms of routing, chaining, and so on.
Yeah, I can totally get that. Now, you've mentioned 180 markets. Just curious in terms of from an actual payment method. So you did mention how you sort of like go very locally, but then from an managing your infrastructure, how does that then play out? Are you essentially establishing as much as a broad connectivity infrastructure to actually run across those 180 markets? Is there any kind of an insight and perspective you could throw in terms of how do you do local globally in terms as well of the ecosystem that you have to manage to get you locally, right?
Yeah, I would say choose your partners carefully. So we spend a lot of time really thinking through what do we want to achieve in the market? Who's our best partner to help us achieve that? And then working, and I'm using the word partner very consciously, working in partnership with whoever their chosen provider is to make sure that we're offering the best service, best connectivity, best performance. So I would say that's really key.
Fantastic. Certainly, in terms of what that also, brings from a jurisdiction perspective. So you being in so many different markets, we've got to bear in mind that payment is a regulated market, and with that comes different mandates and different interpretation as well of the mandate. So it will be good to understand as you have this wider perspective in terms of, say how 3DS essentially are very much, killer in certain region or really an enabler in other region, but just holistically speaking, are there any regulatory or infrastructure challenges that maybe has forced you to kind of like bring some core architectural changes to the way you approach the different jurisdiction?
Yeah, look, it's complex. You've just touched on it. It's really complex. Keeping on top of the changes involves in itself a lot of work, and we depend a lot on our partners to help us. We depend on the schemes, the payment types that we accept, and then obviously ourselves staying close to the ground. We have people in all of our key regions whose job is really to understand what's happening there, and as well as keeping on top of what's happening, it's then figuring out, okay, what does that mean? Is this a change that we think is going to be simply for that one market? How do we deal with that in that case? Is it actually a trend that's either going to be regional or perhaps global? Well, we'll think of it differently if that's the case. And you've touched on a few of the key changes. So it's definitely complex. It's very much always on our minds, and it really is a big aspect of our prioritization. We work in 6 monthly cycles, so ideally we stick to those 6 monthly cycles. If necessary, we'll break and we'll go in, but that's very disruptive for us. We try and avoid that unless it's really absolutely necessary.
Gosh, yeah, I think you could lecture the whole industry with just what you have as a task, managing such a huge infrastructure. I think it would be great to probably end by taking as well some thoughts from you in terms of your perspective going into 2026. We're seeing a lot of different things, a lot of change, a lot of, buzzwords, change, customer behavior. What are probably a couple of thoughts that you want to share with us in terms of what you are seeing becoming or accelerating, maybe from an APM perspective, taking more prominence, maybe in terms of fraud trends, or more generally in terms of what's shaping in the innovation? Would love to get some thought from you there.
Okay. I think some of it is continuity. There's some things that from a payments perspective will always continue to be there and should always be top of anyone's mind. That's providing user choice, providing a seamless experience, and the absolute requirement of trust, making sure that the user understands that the payment method that they're using is one that they can trust, and they can trust you as an organization. You touched earlier on the whole kind of risk fraud management world. I do think there's going to be increasing focus there because, as we said, there's new tech. Good news, there's new tech. Bad news, there's new tech. So it's just making sure that we're always just staying that one step ahead and really being thoughtful about that, just maintaining that balance as we spoke about. And then, of course, agentic commerce is very much on everyone's mind. I think we're going to see some real advances there. But equally, I don't see this being big bang. It's still early days. There's still a lot to be thought through, and it's going back to that seamless customer experience and one they can trust. So in the whole agentic world, there's a lot of thinking to be done there, and lots of policy processes, developments to be made.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. And what a fantastic industry we are privileged to be part of, right? I think that
so.
certainly keeps us awake and challenging us. So definitely, I think if anything, we are probably experiencing something that is quite at a turning point, considering 10 years ago, there's a real acceleration, and wherever plays out to be 2026, I'm pretty sure we are for an interesting run as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's a super day. Payments is always a great industry to be in, but this feels like a really exciting time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandra. It's been lovely to give us a bit more perspective in terms of your market, the inside of your strategy. Certainly wishing you great continuity. You've got quite a task in your hand with the making the framework of your infrastructure. But thank you for sharing with us. And I hope to see you in Berlin next year at the next edition of MPE.
Thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.